In 333 BC, the ancient world was divided between two powers: a young Greek king who had never lost a battle, and the mightiest empire the earth had ever seen. Alexander III of Macedon was 23 years old. In just 2 years, he had already conquered half of Asia Minor and declared himself the liberator of the Greeks. Darius III, the great king of Persia, ruled an empire stretching from Egypt to the borders of India, a dominion of 50 nations and hundreds of millions of souls. The Achaemenid Empire was not merely large, it was a civilization. Its royal road ran nearly 3,000 kilometers, connecting provinces from Sardis to Susa in days. Alexander's weapon was his Macedonian phalanx, a wall of 18-foot spears that had shattered every army it had faced. But the Persians had something the Greeks did not: numbers beyond counting. Alexander had crossed into Asia in 334 BC with roughly 37,000 men. He swept through Granicus, liberated the Ionian cities, and marched south along the Aegean coast. At Gordium, legend says he encountered the famous Gordian knot, a tangle no man had ever undone, bound to a prophecy: whoever loosed it would rule Asia. Alexander simply cut it with his sword. Darius had been watching Alexander's advance with growing alarm. After Granicus, he summoned his council. His Greek mercenary commander, Memnon of Rhodes, urged a strategy of delay: avoid pitched battle, burn the land, starve the Macedonians. Memnon was arguably the most dangerous man Darius had. A brilliant Greek soldier in Persian service, he understood Alexander better than any Persian general could. But fate intervened. Memnon died of fever in 333 BC, and with him went Persia's best strategy. With Memnon gone, Darius made a fateful decision. He would take personal command and meet Alexander in open battle. He assembled a force modern historians estimate at between 100,000 and 250,000 men. Alexander's inner circle was extraordinary. Parmenion, his senior general and father figure, commanded the left wing. Hephaestion, his closest companion, led the cavalry companions. Ptolemy, who would one day rule Egypt, fought at his side. Alexander had pushed south through Cilicia in modern southern Turkey, a narrow corridor hemmed between the Taurus Mountains and the sea. This geography would become the central factor of the battle to come. In Cilicia, disaster nearly struck before a single Persian appeared. Alexander fell gravely ill, possibly from plunging into the cold waters of the Cydnus River, or from exhaustion. For days, his life hung in the balance. His physician Philip prepared a medicine. A letter arrived simultaneously, warning Alexander that Philip had been bribed by Darius to poison him. Alexander handed the letter to Philip and drank the cup. Philip read the accusation while his king watched. It was the act of a man who trusted absolutely or who feared nothing. Alexander recovered. He had lost precious weeks, but emerged from illness with iron resolve. The Persians were somewhere to the north and east. He would find them. Darius, with his enormous host, had marched from Babylon westward, crossing through the Syrian gates, the mountain pass that led into Cilicia from the north. Unknowingly, the two armies were moving past each other. Alexander had marched south toward Syria. Darius had swung north behind him. In a staggering twist of fate, the Persian army cut Alexander's supply lines, placed itself at his rear, and massacred the Macedonian sick and wounded left at Issus. When Alexander received the news that Darius was behind him, his first reaction, recorded by Arrian, was disbelief. He sent a ship to verify the report. The scouts returned. It was true. The great king himself was at their backs. Alexander smiled. He turned his army around. He would not chase Persia across open deserts. Darius had come to him, and had chosen to fight on ground that neutralized his advantage in numbers. The battlefield at Issus was dictated by geography. The Panaris River crossed a coastal plain barely 2 to 3 kilometers wide. Mountains rose sharply to the left. The Mediterranean Sea lay to the right. Darius's hundreds of thousands could not spread out. The battlefield squeezed his massive advantage into uselessness. Darius prepared his position along the north bank of the Panaris. He deployed his Greek mercenaries, the finest infantry he had, at the center. His Persian cavalry massed on his right, near the coast. He anchored his left flank on the mountains. At the center of the Persian line stood the royal chariot of Darius III himself. Elevated, visible to all, the golden flame of the Achaemenid dynasty. Around him stood 10,000 of the immortals, the elite royal guard. No Persian king had ever fallen in battle. Darius intended to watch his empire crush this upstart Greek boy. The morning of November 333 BC, Alexander had marched his army north through the night, and at dawn, deployed them for battle along the south bank of the Panaris River. He rode along his lines on Bucephalus, his black stallion, speaking to each unit personally. To the Macedonians, he spoke of glory and conquest. To the Greek allies, he spoke of the crimes of Xerxes and revenge a century overdue. To the mercenaries, he spoke of gold. Alexander's deployment was precise and deliberate. The Macedonian phalanx held the center. On the right, the place of greatest honor and danger, Alexander himself commanded the elite Companion Cavalry. The Thessalian horsemen, among the best in Greece, took the left flank near the sea, under Parmenion. Between the cavalry and the phalanx stood the Hypaspists, the shield-bearers, 3,000 elite infantry, who could fight in tight formation or open order. They were Alexander's most versatile soldiers, and today, they would be crucial. Across the river, the Persian line was a spectacle of empire. Soldiers from Bactria, Media, Egypt, Arabia, India, a patchwork of languages and weapons, united under the golden banner of Darius. Their numbers dwarfed the Macedonians. Every soldier in Alexander's army could see it clearly. The sheer sight of the Persian army was a weapon in itself. Ancient sources speak of the earth trembling under their feet, of dust rising like storm clouds. No army in Greek memory had ever faced such numbers and survived. Darius had reason for confidence. His Greek mercenaries were battle-hardened veterans. His cavalry on the right wing was superior in numbers. He had chosen to defend the river crossing, giving his enemies the harder task of attack. Alexander studied the Persian deployment carefully. He noticed something. Darius had placed his best infantry, the Greek mercenaries, directly opposite the Macedonian phalanx, the strongest part of Alexander's force. His weaker Persian infantry faced the Companion Cavalry. This was a mistake. Alexander's plan was elegant. His right, the Companions, would charge obliquely at the junction between Darius's Greek mercenaries and the lighter Persian infantry, pierce that seam, and the entire Persian line would fold inward, then drive straight for the royal chariot, kill or capture Darius, and the battle was over. Meanwhile, Darius had also shifted more cavalry toward his right wing near the coast, hoping to wrap around the Macedonian left and hit Alexander's army from behind. If Parmenion's wing collapsed, the entire Macedonian army would be enveloped. Parmenion understood the danger. He sent word to Alexander. The left wing needed reinforcement. Alexander sent the Thessalian cavalry back and added Greek allied horse. Then he sent a simple order to Parmenion: hold. Whatever happens, hold. On the mountain slopes, Persian light troops had taken positions that could threaten Alexander's flank. He sent his Agrionians, fierce Thracian javelin throwers, to clear them. They did so quickly. His right flank was secure. Both armies were now in position, perhaps 60,000 men on one side, possibly 10 times that number on the other, though the Persian count remains debated by historians. What is not debated is this: no army in the ancient world had ever faced such a disparity and won. Not yet. There was a moment of stillness. In that quiet, men on both sides would have prayed to Zeus and Dionysus, to Ahura Mazda and Mithra. Some would live. Most on the Persian side had never lost. Most on the Macedonian side had never been beaten. Alexander raised his spear. The Macedonians advanced. They moved at walking pace at first. Keeping formation across broken ground was everything. The phalanx, the hypaspists, the cavalry, all moved together toward the Panaris River. Persian archers opened fire. Arrows fell across the Macedonian advance like rain. Men stumbled and fell. The line closed ranks and kept moving. Alexander had trained his army to advance fast enough to minimize their time under arrow fire. On the right, Alexander accelerated. His companions moved from walk to trot to canter. He was not waiting for a measured advance. He was going to hit the Persian line before it could fully brace for impact. The companions hit the Panaris River at full charge. The water churned white. On the far bank, the Persian soldiers facing them were lighter infantry, not the elite mercenaries. They saw what was coming, and many wavered. Impact. The companions punched through the Persian left-wing infantry like a spear through cloth. Alexander drove straight through, wheeling right, toward the center, toward Darius, toward the sound of the fiercest fighting. At the center, the phalanx had a harder crossing. The northern bank of the Panaris was steep in places. Formations fractured as men climbed. And waiting on the other side were Darius's Greek mercenaries, professionals who knew exactly how to exploit a gap in a phalanx. The Greek-on-Greek fighting in the center was the bloodiest of the battle. The mercenaries fought with discipline and ferocity. When the Macedonian phalanx lost cohesion crossing the river, the mercenaries drove into the gap, killing Macedonian soldiers by the dozens. On the left, Parmenian's Thessalians faced a full Persian cavalry assault. The Persians were numerous and aggressive. The fighting was brutal. The Macedonian left bent, but did not break. Parmenian's veterans gave ground slowly, buying time. From his chariot, Darius watched. His mercenaries were holding. His right cavalry was pressing the Macedonian left, but his left wing had already collapsed. And now, Darius could see him coming. Alexander had broken through on the right and now wheeled left, striking the Greek mercenaries from their exposed flank. The mercenaries, fighting the phalanx from the front and now hit from the side, began to buckle. The battle had reached its crisis. 3 separate fights were happening simultaneously. Alexander driving for Darius, the phalanx grinding through the mercenaries, and Parmenion holding desperately on the left. Everything depended on what happened next. The Persian immortals closed around their king. These men were not ordinary soldiers. They were the finest warriors in the empire, trained to die before allowing harm to come to the great king. They held their ground as Alexander's cavalry carved through everything around them. Alexander was wounded. A spear grazed his thigh. He did not slow down. He had fought at the very front of every charge since Granicus. He was the weapon. He drove straight toward Darius. In all the ancient sources, Arrian, Plutarch, Diodorus, what happens next is described differently in detail, but identically in outcome. Darius III, the great king of Persia, Lord of Lords, King of Kings, looked at the approaching Alexander and made a choice. He fled. The moment Darius turned, the Persian army began to collapse. An ancient army fought with its will as much as its weapons. When the king, the god king, the son of Ahura Mazda, was seen fleeing, something fundamental broke. The right wing, which had been pressing Parmenion hard, saw the royal standard moving away and faltered. The mercenaries in the center, already flanked and losing, found themselves abandoned. One by one, then all at once, the Persian army ran. Alexander faced the warrior's most agonizing choice. Darius was fleeing. If he could be caught, the war ended here. But his left wing, under Parmenion, was still under pressure. He turned back. He drove the companions back toward the coast, hit the Persian cavalry attacking Parmenion from behind, and shattered them. The left wing was saved. The battlefield was won. The price was Darius. The pursuit was merciless. Ancient battles inflicted most of their casualties not during the fight, but during the rout. Macedonian cavalry chased fleeing Persians for miles into the gathering dusk. Persian losses were catastrophic. Darius had abandoned his chariot, his bow, and his royal cloak in his flight. He escaped on horseback into the Syrian mountains. He was alive, but everything he had brought to Issus was gone. Ancient sources give wildly varying casualty figures, as they often do. But even conservative modern estimates suggest Persia lost tens of thousands killed. Among the Macedonians, the losses, though painful, were a fraction of that. Alexander had won one of the most lopsided victories in military history. Alexander rode into Darius's royal camp. What he found there was beyond anything his Macedonians had ever seen. The Persians had not brought a military camp to Issus. They had brought a palace. The royal tent of Darius III was a civilization unto itself. Golden furniture, vessels of silver and bronze, silk hangings from the east, a bath prepared for the king, fragrant with expensive oils. Enough treasure to fund a small kingdom. Alexander looked around the tent, breathed in the scented air, and, according to Plutarch, turned to his companions and said, "So this is what it means to be a king." But in the royal encampment, something else awaited him. From a nearby pavilion came the sounds of women weeping. Darius had brought his family to Issus. His mother, Sisygambis, his wife, Statera, said to be the most beautiful woman in Asia, his 2 daughters, and his young son. They had been captured. A Persian court official came to Alexander in tears. The royal women had found Darius's abandoned chariot and royal cloak. They believed the great king was dead. They were mourning him. Alexander went to them personally. As he entered with Hephaestion at his side, Sisygambis, the mother of Darius, prostrated herself before Hephaestion, mistaking him for the king. An attendant whispered in her ear. She turned, horrified, and began to rise to correct herself. Alexander stopped her and smiled. "You made no mistake, mother," he said. "He too is Alexander." He gave orders that the royal women were to be treated with full honors due their rank. Their servants would remain. They would keep their titles. No harm would come to them. He would provide for them as if they were his own family. This was not mere calculation, though it was also excellent politics. Ancient sources suggest Alexander genuinely respected what he found. The dignity of the Persian court, the courage of Sisygambis, the tragedy of a royal family, made pawns of war through no fault of their own. That evening, Alexander visited his wounded. He walked among the men, spoke to them by name where he knew them, listened to their accounts of the fighting. He also ordered care for wounded Persian prisoners. It was, by ancient standards, an unusual form of mercy. His generals dined in Darius's tent that night. When someone remarked on the extravagance of the Persian king's table, Alexander replied, "It seems Darius had a different idea of what it means to be a general." He was 23 years old, eating in the palace of an empire he had just broken open. Darius that same night camped in the Syrian mountains with the remnants of his escort. He had no tent, no royal comforts, no army. He had lost his wife, his mother, his children, and the mightiest army in the world. He was still alive. He would rebuild. He swore it. Days after the battle, a letter arrived in Alexander's camp. It bore the royal seal of Darius III. Darius wrote to claim that Persia had taken no hostile action against Macedon. He asked for the return of his family. He offered a ransom. He asked for peace and for an alliance, if Alexander would accept it. Alexander's reply was extraordinary in its arrogance and its clarity. He addressed Darius not as king, but as a subject might address a superior. He recounted the old grievances between Persia and Greece. He declared himself the rightful ruler of all Asia, and he gave Darius a single instruction. If he wanted his family back, he should come to Alexander in person and ask. At some point in the aftermath, perhaps before the reply was sent, Parmenion offered his famous counsel. He said, "If I were Alexander, I would accept Darius's terms and end the war." Alexander looked at him and replied, "So would I, if I were Parmenion." Alexander turned south. He would not chase Darius into the Persian heartland. Not yet. First, he needed to control the entire eastern Mediterranean coast. While any Persian fleet held those ports, his supply lines were vulnerable. He marched toward Phoenicia. The battlefield at Issus grew quiet. The dead were buried, or not. The ravens came. The river flowed on. History had pivoted here, in this narrow coastal strip between mountain and sea. In a few hours on a November afternoon, in a single afternoon, Alexander had destroyed the largest army Persia had fielded in a generation, captured the Persian royal family, broken the myth of Persian invincibility, and opened the entire eastern Mediterranean to conquest. The war was not over, but its outcome, though no one could know it yet, was settled at Issus. To understand why Alexander won at Issus, we must go deeper than the narrative of battle. We must ask, why did one of the greatest kings in the ancient world, with overwhelming numbers and a chosen defensive position, lose to a 23-year-old in a few hours? The first answer is technology. The Macedonian sarissa gave the phalanx a reach advantage of roughly 6 feet over any conventional spear. When two phalanx-style formations met, the sarissa won, before swords were even drawn. The second answer is tactics. Philip II of Macedon, Alexander's father, had invented a revolutionary combination: the phalanx as an anvil to pin the enemy, cavalry as a hammer to strike the exposed flank. Alexander used it perfectly at Issus. The third answer is leadership. Alexander led every charge personally. This was not recklessness. It was military psychology. His presence at the front electrified his men and terrified his enemies. It also allowed him to make instant decisions at the point of crisis. Darius, by contrast, commanded from the rear in Persian tradition. This was not cowardice. It was the role of the great king, whose person was sacred. But it meant he could not respond rapidly to changing conditions. When his line began to break, he had no way to stabilize it except by his presence. And when he fled, that presence destroyed everything. The fourth answer is geography, and Darius chose it. The narrow coastal plain at Issus gave him a defensive advantage, but stripped away his numerical one. He could not outflank Alexander. He could not use his cavalry reserves. His advantage became a liability. The fifth answer is intelligence. Alexander identified the weak seam in the Persian deployment, between the mercenaries and the lighter infantry, and attacked it with his best troops at exactly that point. This was not luck. This was careful analysis under pressure. The sixth answer is training. Alexander's army had been campaigning together for nearly 2 years by Issus. They trusted each other. They could maintain formation under fire, cross rivers without breaking ranks, and react to orders under conditions of chaos. Professional soldiers against a larger, but less cohesive force. We must give credit where it is due. The army that won at Issus was built by Philip II. Alexander's genius was to wield it perfectly. Philip had reorganized the Macedonian state, reformed the military, and created the finest combined arms force the ancient world had ever seen. His son inherited a weapon and knew exactly how to use it. Alexander had also been educated by Aristotle himself, perhaps the greatest mind of the ancient world. Aristotle taught him not just philosophy and rhetoric, but biology, geography, and the art of reasoning from evidence. At Issus, Alexander outthought an opponent as much as he outfought him. In ancient warfare, the decisive moment almost always came on a flank. Armies held their center with their best troops precisely because they knew the flanks were vulnerable. Alexander's attack on the Persian left was not improvised. It was the fulfillment of a doctrine. It is worth pausing to honor the Persian-Greek mercenaries. They fought brilliantly. They held their ground even after both flanks collapsed. They inflicted serious casualties on the Macedonian phalanx, but they could not save a battle that had already been decided on the wings. The ancient world processed Issus through mythology. Alexander, who had claimed descent from Achilles and from Zeus himself, seemed to his contemporaries to be more than mortal. His victories were taken as proof of divine favor, and in an age when soldiers fought harder when they believed the gods were on their side, that belief was itself a military asset. The Persian army that survived Issus was broken in morale as much as in numbers. Soldiers who had believed they served the invincible king of an eternal empire had watched that king flee. Some would fight again. Many simply went home. And yet, Darius still ruled most of the world. Persia was not defeated. The empire was intact. Darius would rebuild. In 2 years, at a place called Gaugamela, in the plains of modern Iraq, they would meet again. The Persians would have more men, better ground, and a new weapon, scythed war chariots. It would not be enough. The most famous image of the Battle of Issus is not a painting or a drawing. It is a mosaic. Discovered in Pompeii in 1831, the Alexander mosaic is believed to be a Roman copy of a Greek painting made shortly after the battle. It shows Alexander in furious charge, and Darius with his arm outstretched, perhaps toward a falling companion, perhaps in a last desperate gesture of command. His eyes wide, his chariot already turning. Look at Darius's face in the mosaic. The artist, whoever they were, gave him not cowardice but tragedy. This is a great man facing the end of something enormous. There is pathos in that face. The ancient world understood that Darius was not a villain. He was simply not Alexander. The Panaris River still exists. Today it is called the Payas River, flowing through the Turkish province of Hatay into the Gulf of Iskenderun, a name derived, like dozens of other place names across the Middle East, from Alexander himself. Alexander founded a city near the site of the battle, Alexandria by Issus, later called Alexandretta, today Iskenderun. He founded dozens of Alexandrias across his conquests, but this one marked a personal turning point, the moment his conquest of the world became real. History's relationship with Alexander is complicated. He was a genius and a killer, a liberator and a conqueror. He spread Greek culture across the known world, the Hellenistic age his legacy, while also burning, looting, and enslaving. At Issus, he showed both sides, the tactical brilliance and the personal magnanimity toward the royal family. The relationship between Alexander and Sisygambis is one of the stranger footnotes of the ancient world. Ancient sources say she came to regard Alexander as her true son. When Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BC, 10 years after Issus, Sisygambis refused to eat and died within days. Whether from grief or choice, history does not say. Issus was not the end, it was the beginning. After securing the Mediterranean coast, including the legendary 7-month siege of Tyre, Alexander marched into Egypt and was hailed as a god. Then east to Gaugamela, where he finished Darius. Then east to Persepolis, where he burned the palace of Xerxes. Then east to the edge of the known world. Alexander died in Babylon on June 10, 323 BC. He was 32 years old. He had ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen. He had never lost a battle. When asked on his deathbed to whom he left his empire, he said, "If the sources are to be believed, to the strongest." His generals, the Diadochi, the successors, tore the empire apart in wars that lasted 40 years. But the world he had made, the Hellenistic world, Greek culture fused with Persian and Egyptian and Babylonian civilization, survived for 3 centuries, until Rome subsumed it all. And it all pivoted, in some essential way, on one afternoon, in a narrow coastal plain in Cilicia, on a river, on a boy king who never stopped moving forward. History remembers Issus through Alexander's eyes. But let us pause and consider Darius III, a man who has been reduced, unfairly, to a symbol of flight. Darius was not born to the throne. Before he became king, he was Artashata, a royal official who had personally killed an enemy champion in single combat during a military campaign. He was brave, He was capable. He was not the trembling figure of Alexander propaganda. He came to power in 336 BC through a series of court murders. The same year, Alexander came to power in Macedon through his father's assassination. Both men inherited thrones stained with blood. Neither had chosen their circumstances. As a ruler, Darius was competent. He maintained the empire's complex administrative structures, suppressed revolts, and held together a political entity so large that modern governments with computers and satellites would struggle to manage it. After Issus, Darius did not despair. He wrote to Alexander, tried to negotiate, and simultaneously began assembling a new army. He would spend 2 years rebuilding his forces, designing new weapons, including the scythed war chariots, and choosing better ground. At Gaugamela in 331 BC, he tried again with perhaps 1 million men by some ancient counts, almost certainly an exaggeration, but the forces were enormous. He chose a flat plain to negate the terrain advantage Issus had given Alexander. He had better cavalry, scythed chariots, war elephants. Alexander won anyway. After Gaugamela, Darius fled east again, deeper into his own empire. But now, his satraps and generals lost confidence. The man who had twice fled before Alexander seemed to them less a king and more a liability. Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, organized the conspiracy. His reasoning was brutal but practical. If Alexander was offered the person of Darius, perhaps the conquest could be stopped. Or, if Darius died, the empire might rally around a new king, Bessus himself. In 330 BC, Bessus and his conspirators seized Darius and stabbed him. They left him to die on a cart on a Parthian road. Alexander, pursuing hard, arrived to find Darius already dead. Alexander covered Darius's body with his own cloak. He ordered a royal funeral, Persian rites, full honors. He declared that Darius had been murdered by traitors, not defeated by an enemy. He hunted Bessus across Central Asia for 2 years before capturing and executing him. The exact location of Darius's tomb is unknown. The man who had been king of kings, who had assembled the largest army in the ancient world and brought it to a narrow plain in Cilicia, vanished into history. His name lives because of the man who defeated him. History loves its counterfactuals. What if Darius had followed Memnon's advice and refused pitched battle? What if Alexander had died of illness before Issus? What if the Persian left had held? The world we live in, shaped by Hellenistic culture, by the fusion of East and West, by the spread of Greek philosophy and language, might have been profoundly different. The consequences of Issus ripple further than most people realize. The Hellenistic world that Alexander's conquests created became the cultural matrix of early Christianity. The Greek language became the language of the New Testament because of Alexander's conquests. Western civilization's Greek roots, philosophy, democracy, drama, science, survived and spread eastward because of a battle fought in 333 BC. Alexander himself came to see Persia not as an enemy culture to be destroyed, but as one to be merged with his own. He married a Bactrian princess. He encouraged his generals to marry Persian noblewomen. He wore Persian dress. He envisioned not a Greek empire, but a fusion empire. Whether this was vision or pragmatism, it was genuinely new. Today, you can visit the region of Issus. The mountains are still there. The sea is still there. The plain is quieter than it has been in millennia. Farmland now, olive groves, the ordinary beauty of the Turkish Mediterranean coast. Somewhere beneath the soil, the dead of Issus are still there too, unexcavated, unnamed, part of the ground itself. How do we know what happened at Issus? Our main sources, Arrian, Plutarch, Diodorus Siculus, Curtius Rufus, were writing 300 to 500 years after the battle, working from earlier accounts that no longer survive. History at this distance is part fact, part tradition, part myth, but enough survives to reconstruct the essential shape of what happened. Modern scholars continue to debate the details, the exact size of Persia's army, the precise location of the Macedonian right wing, whether Alexander's wound in the thigh occurred at Issus or was confused with another battle. The living discipline of history means Issus is still being argued over and still yielding new understanding. The Battle of Issus is still taught in military academies. The hammer and anvil combined arms doctrine that Alexander used has been reinvented and applied in every century since, by Caesar, by Napoleon, by Rommel, by commanders in World War II's North African campaign, fighting over terrain not entirely unlike the Cilician coast. Napoleon carried a copy of Arrian's account of Alexander's campaigns on his campaigns. He considered Alexander the greatest general in history. Caesar wept at a statue of Alexander, lamenting that at the same age, Alexander had already conquered the world. The shadow of Issus falls across centuries. Let us picture it once more. The narrow plain, the river. On one side, an empire. On the other, an idea. That one man, moving fast enough and thinking clearly enough, could shatter anything. The armies advance. The arrows fly, the companions charge, and in the heart of the Persian line, surrounded by 10,000 of his finest soldiers, a king watches death, approaching on a black horse, and makes a choice that will define him forever. These were real people. Alexander got wounded. Parmenian's wing nearly broke. Darius made the worst decision of his life, and knew it in the moment. Sisygambis buried a son's dignity in the dirt before a foreign conqueror, and found, to her surprise, that he was kind. History is made by human beings making human choices under impossible pressure. The night after Issus, the stars would have been very bright. The survivors on both sides, those who could still see them, looked up at the same stars. The ones who had fought under the golden banner, and the ones who had marched under the star of Macedon. The battle was over. The world had changed. Most of them would not know it for years. The flame lit at Issus, the fusion of East and West, the demonstration that empires are mortal and genius is real, passed through Rome, through Byzantium, through the Islamic Golden Age, through the Renaissance, and into our own time. We live in a world shaped, in ways we rarely trace, by what happened in that narrow plain in 333 BC. The cities we live in, the philosophies we inherit, the languages we speak, all carry the mark of what Alexander set in motion. And it was at Issus, more than any other single moment, that Alexander proved it was possible. He was 23 years old. The greatest empire in the world lay cracked before him. The night air smelled of blood and incense from the Persian camp. He was already thinking about what came next. That is the story of the Battle of Issus. A narrow plain, a river in November, an empire, and a 23-year-old with something to prove, and 3 hours that echoed for 3,000 years. Thank you for watching. The Battle of Issus remains one of the most studied and most astonishing military engagements in history. A masterpiece of planning, speed, and will, set against the most beautiful and tragic backdrop that antiquity could provide. If you want to go deeper, the ancient sources are surprisingly readable. Arrian, in particular, gives a clear, military-minded account. Modern biographies by Robin Lane Fox and Peter Green offer decades of scholarship in accessible form. The Alexander Mosaic in the National Archaeological Museum of Naples is viewable online and is well worth your time. Next time, we'll follow Alexander south to the Siege of Tyre, where he built a causeway to an island fortress and spent 7 months reducing it, and then to Egypt, where the priests of Amun greeted him as the son of a god. The story is far from over. History does not sleep. It waits in rivers and plains and narrow coastal passages, in the soil and the stone, for someone willing to listen. This has been the Battle of Issus. Until next time.